Hey guys, Benji from the Sling Den here, and today I'm going to be giving you my top 5 tips for beginners. Let's get on with it. Are you new to the hobby? If so, welcome. It's great to have you, but I'm going to take a wild guess and say you want to improve on some accuracy. Now, I do want to get one thing clear. I am far from the best shooter in the world. In fact, I've only been shooting for a couple of years. However, the benefit that gives me is everything I've learned up to now is fresh in my mind. Now, when I first started shooting, I couldn't hit something as simple as a tin can from maybe 10 meters. Now that sounds crazy, but trust me, we've all been there. And hopefully, after I've given you my top 5 tips, you can go away and really improve your game. Now, the top 5 tips I'm going to be giving you are in no particular order. They're also applicable for all kinds of shooting. So if you want to shoot OTT, TTF, long draw, short draw, it really doesn't matter. These tips are going to be able to help you. Now, with all that being said, let's move on to my tip number 5. So guys, tip number 5 might be a boring one, but it might just be the most important, and that is mastering the fundamentals. Now, when you first start shooting, one of the problems you may have is that you build yourself a bad habit, and that'll throw your shot off. Bad habits can be extremely difficult to get out of, and you want to avoid them at all costs. What I learned from was having good form. Now, with good form, you've got a really good chance of getting off on the right foot in your slingshot journey. And talking of feet, the first thing you want to start off with is your base, and that is your stance. If your feet are too close together, it's going to give you balance problems. You want your feet nicely apart, nice and grounded. You also want to be square onto your target. It's also a very good idea to have good, strong posture. Now, with a good stance and good solid posture, when you come to take your shot, everything's nice and stiff. And that means very little movement in the shot. With little movement in the shot, that means the ball is going to travel, hopefully, in a straight line. Now, one thing I struggled with as a beginner was shooting high. And I found the reason behind that being a speed bump. Now, what is a speed bump, you ask? A speed bump is where a ball has to travel over the bottom finger. So if your pouch is like that, you can see there, the ball has to travel over the bottom of your finger as it's released. That will throw your shot off high. Now, there's a very, very simple fix to this. And some people laugh at my method, but it works. You need to raise your elbow. If you look close up, with the elbow low, you can see there how the pouch is bent, forcing the ball to have to travel over the bottom finger. Now, as I raise my elbow, you can see there how the pouch goes nice and straight. This was engraved into me. And that's the reason why, when I first load up, I raise my elbow and then follow through. That elbow doesn't move, and I know I have very little chance of a speed bump. Now, another thing that's quite important that might seem very, very simple, but trust me, a lot of people make this mistake, is how you load your pouch. What you don't want is the ball in your pouch like so. It seems obvious, but as you can see there, one band is stretching more than the other. You really don't want that. With the ball nice and central in the pouch and the 2 knots together, that's going to give you every chance of getting good accuracy. Now, there are a lot of technical videos out there that'll teach you how to shoot. This isn't one of them. The whole point of this tip is just to remember some of the basic principles that'll help you get you started. Now, let's move on to tip number 4. So guys, tip number 4 is to start off with a nice light setup. There's nothing wrong with a heavier setup, thicker bands, and bigger ammo. However, when you first start shooting, trust me, it's a lot easier to practice with a light setup. And there are a few reasons for this. The first one being you can practice for a lot longer in your practice sessions with a light setup. Trust me, if you get yourself a 1mm band, you're not going to be able to throw out a load of shots in one single practice session. With a nice light setup, I can hold this all day long. As you can see, I'm talking to you here. There's very little stress. And I can do that all day long. Also, when we're thinking about things like technique, with a light setup, there's little pressure coming here. I'm not forced to let go because there's little pressure. And what that means is you can concentrate on your form and technique. You can make sure your top and bottom bands are aligned. Your reference is on point. Your elbow, as we mentioned earlier, is nice and high. You're ready for that nice smooth release. And trust me guys, you can definitely hunt with a light setup. Take a look at this video of a shot I made a few days ago from a very good distance and just look at the damage on the can. Here you go. So as you can see there, a nice solid shot from a good distance with plenty of power. So, thinner bands doesn't mean less power. If you want to move on to a heavier setup in the future, that's absolutely fine. You can do that. I've even done it myself. But now, I am back to the lighter bands. Another reason I like a lighter setup is because if you use something like an 8mm steel, the ball bearing will travel at a straighter trajectory for a longer period of time, which means you have to judge the drop of the shot a lot less than you would with a heavier bit of ammo. Now, with all that being said, let's move on to tip number 3. So guys, tip number 3 is to shoot paper, or a paper plate in my case. Whatever you want to use, draw a circle and shoot at it. That's going to give you your fact-finding information to tell you exactly where your shots are going. Now, you may be eagle-eyed and be able to see whether you're shooting high, low, left, right, but it's not going to give you that information in fine detail. What shooting paper allows you to do is see exactly where that shot hit. Now, let me show you some examples. I have made these examples with a pen just for example purposes, okay? So let's say, for example, we're taking a shot like that. As you can see, yeah, great, we've got 3 shots, bang on the money. Fantastic. But not really. Look at the other shots, they're all over the place. That means you need some serious work, whether it be your stance, your head tilt, amongst a couple of other things. That's not really showing you what you're doing wrong. If this is the case and this is what you're getting, again, go back to tip number 5, make sure you're following the fundamentals and try again. Because if you do the same thing consistently, your shot should hit at the same point, whether it is left, right, high or low. If you're doing the same thing consistently, your shot should hit the same place. Now, let's show you another example. So this is a lot better. And you may be thinking, but none of your shots are on target. Correct. However, all my shots are what we call grouped. All the shots are just above the target. What that means is there's one simple fix, and then guess what? You're going to be consistently accurate, hitting that target every single time. Something like this might be what we mentioned earlier, the speed bump of shooting high. It could be the reference point. It could be your anchor point. It could be a few things that just takes a minor adjustment to bring that shot down, and then boom, you're on the money. By shooting paper, it really does give you the information you need to be able to adjust your shot and get accurate. Now, let's move on quickly to tip number 2. So guys, at 2, I've got make your own bands. Now there's a number of reasons why this has made my list. I'm going to tell you exactly why. Now, when you first start making bands, it can be complicated, but once you've done it a couple of times, it's pretty straightforward. And if you do get stuck, my friend Mark over at ATO has, in my opinion, the best video out there on how to cut your bands and how to fine tune them. So I highly suggest you check that out. Now that moves me on to the first benefit, fine tuning. By making your own bands, you can fine tune them just for you. You can use different latex, different tapers, different lengths, different pouches, and find out what works for you. When I done this, my accuracy really did skyrocket. I started to understand why tapers and lengths and different pouches were important. I made a whole bunch of band sets, went out to the field, done some testing and found out what worked for me. And you can do that too. Now I know it's enticing to want to buy yourself a nice new frame for say 50, 60 pounds, but instead you can buy yourself this. What you see there is everything you need to get started to make up your own bands. A lot of this stuff here, once you've got it for good. The only thing you really need to change is the latex, maybe the pouches, but I prefer to use the pouches I've used on old sets because they're nice and rugged and they feel quite nice in my hand. But again, it's up to you. Also, by making your own bands, you'll save yourself a lot of money, which you can then put aside and get yourself a nice new frame. See how it all comes together? There's a number of reasons there why making your own bands should be on this list. Not only can you save money and get yourself a whole bunch of frames, but it can also improve your accuracy. Now, let's move on to tip number 1. So guys, tip number 1 is quite a cheesy one, but it's one that I really want to give you. And that is enjoy the ride. Enjoy the learning process. In a way, I wish I could go back to the days where I was barely able to hit a tin can and do it all over again. Although it's been frustrating, I've enjoyed every single second of it. I've also met some of the best friends possible through this hobby, and I hope you do too. There are some fantastic people in this community. There are some fantastic YouTube channels to give you help and advice, and I highly suggest you check them out. But just remember, practice is key. Now, I do want to say one other thing. Please be sensible when you're doing your shooting. Our hobby is on thin ice due to a few people using them in the wrong way. So please, 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 just be sensible. Now, I'm hoping my top tips will help you really improve on your accuracy. If they do, let me know in the comment section. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. It really does go a long way. Also hit that thumbs up button. Anyway, I'm off for a shoot. I hope you are too, and I'll catch you in the next one.